Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, Jake McKee. Welcome to this Melting Spot interview series. How are you?
Good, good. Hot day in Texas.
It's pretty hot in Paris too, so we're on the same team. Hi,
Yeah,
everyone. Hello. Thanks for joining. Very excited to have Jake with us today. We're going to talk about lots of different things, but um, it's hard to think of two more appealing brands than Lego and Apple. Lego for kids and Apple for grown-up kids. So we're excited to have both today with Jake. So Jake did some amazing work at Lego and Apple, to name a few of the communities that he's helped bring together. So very excited to have you here with us, Jake. Today we're gonna try and cut all the crap around community building, and we're going to go straight to the point. Is there such a thing as a selfless community, and how can actually brands balance the interests of like their own interests and the interests of their members? So it's going to be exciting. But first off, let's just introduce Jake, feel free to tell us more about yourself and where you're coming from.
yeah. Thanks. So, like I said, I'm based in Austin, Texas. I've been here for a while, but definitely looking to do something about where I live when it's 114 degrees on a regular basis. Um, I have had a very long community career focused on helping brands of all types across the globe build and execute community strategy, community programs, super fan programs, all that kind of fun stuff. And as you mentioned, I've had the privilege of working at two of my all-time favorite companies, Apple and Lego, amongst others. I started my career doing web development in the early days, and I've always joked that I've been doing community since that meant convincing clients to put an email address on their website, because I had more than one client tell me, well, what happens if they contact us? And sometimes I still feel like we're having some of those kind of similar conversations, but that evolved when I went to Lego and started doing community full time for the adult fan consumers, people who build with Lego as a creative medium, folks 18 plus, and left Lego, went into consulting, built a social media and community consulting practice back in those early days, sold it to Price Waterhouse. Was a partner there for 3 years and doing community work. Left and ran the Apple Global Support community for a while, and have been doing consulting since I left Apple, for all kinds of brands: Southwest, Canon Camera, H&R Block, Cancer Treatment Centers of America, Calix, yeah, a bunch of brands all over the spectrum, big and small projects.
Cool. Not to mention the community manager webcomic that you started during the pandemic
Yeah.
as well.
Well, so there's also two big side projects amongst others. I have several more in the works, but yeah, I started a web comic called Confessions of a Community Manager, with me doing the writing and the concepting, and working with an artist that I worked with, interestingly enough, when I was at Lego back in the day, for some other artwork. The other project is, you can find that at confessionsofacommunitymanager.com. We can probably put it in the chat too. But the other project I do, U.S. based right now, but trying to figure out how to expand to Europe and beyond, called Dinner Five, Dinner Five, the number 5.org, and it's a monthly dinner series. Although we hold it virtually during lunch these days, um, but started out in person, moved to virtual. But it's really meant for senior community leaders to get together in a cone of silence, safe environment to talk openly about what they're struggling with, what they're needing help from, and really just to kind of connect with other senior community professionals. Amusingly, senior community professionals are some of the hardest people to either find in communities participating actively, or to get together with community activities, for a bunch of very strange social reasons, I'm sure. But not least of which is just the difficulty of their positions and the amount of work that a lot of these teams are doing by the individuals. So, about a little over 3 years ago, I put together Dinner Five as a way to connect. For I always say, for connection, conversation, camaraderie, right? For people who are in a very unique position and very often very alone in their own companies.
Cool. That's exciting. You're
Yeah,
everywhere. Well done.
I'm a I'm a community nerd through and through.
Great. Thanks. The like when we prepared for this chat a few days ago, you mentioned that we keep saying, like, in the sales world, and certainly I do, because I've been doing sales work for a long time. We keep saying that customer is king, and that customer's always right. And the first thing you started saying is that, well, members are not always right. I mean, we need to figure out what brands need as well from their community before actually thinking of how we can serve our own customers' purpose. So let's dive right into it. The whole point of this talk today is to understand how we can balance the interest. For those who are just joining, just summarizing the topic of the chat, we're trying to figure out how to balance the interest between a brand
Mhm.
and its community. So let's start with question number one. Is there such a thing as a selfless community, Jake?
Yeah, and this is such a fun question because that that tagline, the customer's always right. Sure, to an extent, to in a way, but also that I think a lot of people interpret that as I've got to do whatever, I've got to give up everything about myself to give to somebody else in order for success to happen. And we're going to talk about this today, but I think that's exactly the wrong thing to be thinking, right? It is a balance, and my mantra for 20 years has been everybody goes home happy, right? When you create an environment where everybody goes home happy, including um, the company is successful enough to deliver awesome things to the community, right? And what do community members want? Why are they so connected? Why are they loyal? Why are they participatory with these communities, brand communities, or about the brand in other communities? Back to the Lego or Apple fandom. Why do people love those products? There's reasons for that. There's intrinsic reasons for that, and very often, it's because Apple and Lego deliver awesome products, right? I still remember the day that I saw my first Lego Star Wars product on the shelf and thought, my God, I got to get back into this as an adult, right? This is so much fun. The Apple computers, I enjoy using it. It's not a chore, right? It's something I really am passionate about. I love my iPhone. I love how my iPhone works with my laptop and my iPad and so on. And the understanding of the customer, it's not about the customer always being right, because I probably wouldn't have come up with the type of iPhone that Johnny Ives did, right. But I would have liked to have. I enjoyed getting that process. I enjoyed getting it, and Apple understood how to really pay attention to what customer processes, or what their desires were, but also what was happening around them, right, so that they could deliver back. And in this mantra of everybody goes home happy came up at Lego because one of my colleagues, actually several of my colleagues, early on, kept saying, "Well, we just have to give all this stuff to the community." And I said, well, sure, we want to give them awesome products and awesome activities and awesome opportunities. We also want to make sure that they understand that we need things too, right? This idea of, is an inherently selfless act. Well, my all-time favorite episode of that show, Friends, was when the Phoebe character she spent the whole episode trying to find a truly selfless act, right? And she couldn't do it because every time she did something nice for somebody, she really enjoyed it and felt good, and so therefore it wasn't selfless, right? She got something out of it. And the point here of this idea of selflessness is kind of foolish, right? We are in business to make money. We are in business to create shareholder value. We are in business to make big change happen, and nobody denies that. None
Mm,
of those community members at Lego said to me, I cannot believe you guys are trying to make money. How shameful, right?
mm,
And when I changed the conversation, both for my colleagues internally and for those externally, those external community members, to say, everybody goes home happy, right? I've got to be happy as the company. You've got to be happy as the customer. And if we're not both talking openly about what makes us happy, it's real hard for us to support each other in that journey, right? So I spent a lot of time educating my colleagues on what it was that excited and delighted the fans, the Lego fans, and in turn reassuring them that I'm going out of my way. And of course, the landscapers just showed up for the day, so hopefully you can hear me okay.
that's
Um,
fine. That's fine.
but
Yeah.
I assured and communicated openly in a way that had never been done, and not by a lot of companies at that time, much less by the Lego company itself, a fairly private organization. Um, I really worked with the adult fans to get them to understand, hey, if you want awesome products, here's how we have to get them, how many we have to get sold in numbers, how we
Mm.
have to go about communicating that to our colleagues, some of the internal challenges of doing unique one-offs, right? Not just the how many we have to sell to make our money back, but how do you get in the product pipeline? What kind of products are they? How do they appeal to the mass audience? I had a lot of conversations just educating them on what we went through so that when I said, here's what if you want this, then you need to going to do these things, they'd say, okay, cool. And they started actually using some of that language themselves over time. So if new members would pop into the community and say, boy, I sure want this kind of product, then you'd have, 5 community members immediately respond and say, well, they can't do it for all these reasons Jake explained to us, right? Um, but when they started actually understanding what value we needed to see from the community or from the larger customer base, they'd go, oh, okay, cool, we can work on that, right? At our events, we're going to start putting more emphasis, cause and effect, right? Because of this open conversation. If you don't know what makes your significant other happy, it's going to be a real short relationship, right? And the only way for them to know is for you to share, right? They can't just magically understand what's going to make you happy.
Yeah.
You have to say, hey, here's what's going on. The other side has to say, thanks for sharing. I appreciate that. I, in turn, want you to do these things to make me happy. Oh, thanks for sharing that. Right. That's the best kind of relationship, whether it's between a company and a customer base or whether it's husband and wife, right?
Yeah, I like that. And how open can you be as a community builder with your community around your metrics, around what's going to keep you in your job? Like, let's
Yeah,
take the
that's a good
Lego
question.
fan community. How far could you go in like in terms of we're going to talk about ROIs and metrics later on, but
Sure.
how far did you go as the community builder at Lego fan with the Lego adult fan community?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And so let me back up and reiterate what you said so I can answer it simply. You asked, how open can you be? And my answer is almost always vastly more open than you are comfortable with, right? If you've seen the Lego movie, you know about Professor Business, right? And I always joke about putting on my Professor Business hat. And all of us have been trained, our society has been trained as business people to not share. It's
Yeah.
dangerous to share, right? It's illegal to share. It's not as dangerous as we think it is. And the reality is, it actually can be, and often is, incredibly beneficial to be more open and honest, right? Back to, if you're trying to create a relationship between company and customer, you have models for what relationships work like, right? Back to the husband and wife, right? Boyfriend, girlfriend dynamic. If I have issues and I never share them, how's the other person supposed to know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And often the act of sharing brings us vastly closer together than me trying to protect them by not sharing,
Mm.
protect myself by not sharing, right? And the same thing goes in business, whether we want to admit it or not. We are so nervous about numbers, right? So I had a whole conversation early on. Our direct consumer exclusives, the $300 or 3,000 piece Imperial Star Destroyer from Star Wars, right? One of the biggest sets that had ever been made by Lego at that time. Topped only by another direct to consumer product later on, right? Um, but we made runs of 10,000, right? That was kind of the minimum quantity we could produce and have it be uh, cost efficient from a pure production standpoint. So we had to do at least 10,000 of most of our products. And I had an argument with one of my colleagues for an hour about why that number mattered. And I kept saying, is there any trade secret to the number 10,000? Will our competitors hear that number and go, oh, well, they do 10,000. That means something to us that will improve our ability to compete against them. Oh no, this is industry standard. So why wouldn't we share that number? What's the problem? Explain to me why that number matters to you to protect. And they couldn't do it. So we said flat out, 10,000 is the number. And and the fans went, oh, okay, cool. I understand scale now. We're not talking, a bazillion of these. but it's a big enough number that we can't just propose it back to the, giving them these data points that they can grab onto and support, and then support for us. Um, they'd say, okay, cool. I understand why we can't just do 500, right? It seems like you could make some money, but I get, okay, that's where the cost break happens. Cool. So let me start thinking in terms of 10,000, right?
And did the
Um,
community actually help you get to the 10,000 mark? Like,
oh
were there
yeah,
any
yeah,
pre-sales among the
yeah.
community?
And so yes, I mean, first the biggest issue was them understanding the scale we were talking about, that it
Yeah.
wasn't massive, but it also was not 500, right? It wasn't these smaller numbers that they were thinking, well, there's 500 of us, we each buy one, then you've made your money back, right? No, 10,000 is the point we make our money back. So that was part of it, them understanding it, feeling more comfortable with it, having a better connection and relationship with them. But also part of it was, it would drive them to say, okay, cool, what kinds of products would be interesting for us to get what we want, but also interesting enough to sell 10,000 of them. um, how do we recruit people to come into the community in order to buy some of these products so we can get more of this cool stuff, right? How can we make sure to advertise the Lego Direct products, the direct to consumer products at our events? So, can we take a stack of catalogs and aggressively give them out, not just offer them as an option, but tell people, hey, if you liked what you saw here, there's similar products in this catalog. Take it home, go online or call the number and order some of this stuff, right? And kind of closing that loop. And yeah, we did see that, those efforts. I mean, you can see it in the results today, right? If you go on the lego.com site and look at the number of flat out amazing and often expensive and large exclusives, there has been some excellent products put out that sell like hotcakes now, right? Because the culture, sort of that nerd culture of creativity, has grown so significantly, right? One of my metrics was how many Lego models do we see on office desks? Because when I started, there was very few, and if you had a Lego model on your desk, people kind of look at you and say, "Well, who's the weirdo in the office, right? Who's bringing in toys?" And now, I mean, walk in most office buildings, and you're going to find a bunch of desks that have some Lego model on them of some sort, right? Because we changed that culture of oddity to normalcy.
Cool. And how did the community actually help you find new community members? 'Cause you mentioned that when it comes to actually finding rounding up the 10,000 mark for the
Mhm.
exclusive model, that people talk to each other and, and ask them to join the community and find out about what you had up your sleeve in terms of exclusive models. So how does the community actually help source new community members? How do you encourage this referral?
Right. Yeah, and back to the mantra, right? Everybody goes home happy. Part of what I was trying to make sure that when I talked to the community members, I was helping them understand what made them happy too, right? That was part of my job, was to kind of, yeah, I always joked it was the guy that whispered in the king's ear, the advisor that said, "Hey, you should do these things," and the king says, "We should do these things." So part of that was, the encouragement I gave them, the community members, was things like, "Hey, you've got this 50-foot square train layout that you've built as a club, right? And you've got 10 people in your club. You could make a 75-foot square one if you had 10 more people, right?" And they'd go, "Yeah, that's true. We don't do a lot of recruiting. It's just been us for a while. And we've had a couple of members drop off, so we haven't really replaced them. Yeah, maybe we should put more energy into this," right? Um, I talked to him about, have you ever thought about calling up your local newspaper, your local TV station, and inviting them to come to your event where you've invited the public, which is also one of those things I really encourage them to do, is not just set it up and have a fun time for themselves and maybe other Lego fans from outside the city to travel in, but can you have a public day where you invite kids and families to come in and see what you've shown off, because this is so amazing? And in doing that, people would start to, adults would come in, and because they wanted to see it too. They may have some passing interest and never really thought about being part of a, Lego fan club, and come in and see what was going on and go, "Wow, this is cool. How do I come to one of your meetings?" Right? And it cascades from there. um, but again, it's sort of providing that, how do you create awesomeness, right? What does the awesomeness mean to you? And for me as a community professional, there was all these reasons, right? There's the value of convincing them to open up the public day, was that all this stuff that they're doing in private gets seen publicly, right? The and I'm sorry, let see, dinner5.org. I'm not sure why we're getting a 404 on that. The
Let me check.
Yeah, the dynamic here of what I was trying to do was always to say, I called it the octopus theory, right? That every action you had 8 tentacles to it. So you didn't do one thing for one reason. You did one thing because it had 8 impacts, right? Especially as community professionals who were trying to make a lot happen with a very small amount of resources. But the reason that I really spend a lot of time trying to encourage them to open up to the public is because if they're not open to the public, reporters don't show up, right? If reporters show up, families show up, then there's stories that get told in media channels, which helps promote the concept, which helps them grow, helps us get more attention internally, helps us have better outcome um, in inside, right? So we're seeing more product sales that we can attribute to people that are showing up to the events or talk in the fan clubs, that sort of thing. And so again, all boats rise, right? I could say, hey, we were in we were above the fold in the LA Times, Los Angeles Times Sunday Living Lifestyles edition, and that's a huge get, right? People fight their whole careers to get in that. Here we are, we got that, and the PR team goes, oh, this is awesome. Maybe not at first, but eventually they got around to understanding that was awesome. Um, but we're because we said, hey, open up. Um, the fan club gets more members from just drive-by people going, "Oh, this is cool. I want to join." They get people admiring their work, which is a huge part of why you would display in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more that you get that admiration for your work, the more inclined you are to do cooler, more interesting work, right? Um, that grows. The cooler the work becomes, the more the product designers inside Lego go, huh, what are they doing over there? Maybe I can get some influence, right? Maybe I get some ideas. Maybe I can work with them, bring them into what we're doing, which makes better product, more interesting product. And of course, you get PR value, you get product sales value, you get all these things that happen when you focus on these bits and pieces that are, the canary in the coal mine type of activities.
Cool. And because you've been so, we have two more questions to cover, but I wanted to quickly touch on how you engaged your community of Lego adult fans, and more specifically, you've been in community building for a couple of decades, so way before pandemic times.
Yeah.
How do you balance online and offline? Because you just talked about
Mhm.
events. Um, like within the Lego community, are there any online events now, or how do people actually get together?
Yeah, so Lego's an interesting one. I mean, Lego at this point, if you can name it, their team or the community itself is doing it, right? So they're doing online activities, they're doing in-person events. They do, it's a physical product. Coming together as a physical product is a big deal for the enjoyment of the process, right? Um, so there's a lot of uh, um, there's a lot of more conferences or events where you come together and display your content, have building activities, build days. There's the official event now that has a big fan presence as well, called Lego Fest, that
Hmm.
travels around. uh, yeah, I'm not sure where they're at post pandemic, but pre-pandemic they were doing, I think, a couple of them a year, driven by the company at this point, but they have many of those that are fan driven as well. There are various types of fest events. um, you know I I think the core of the question though is, how do you balance the online and the offline? And I think it depends entirely on the dynamic. So with Lego, there was a certain desire to build in person, sorry, to connect in person, show off your building, activities and that sort of thing. But it was also a very individualized activity. The fans started creating things. The first one was called Moonbase, right? Where on those big base plates of 48 studs by 48 studs, you'd build different components of an overall moon base, and they had connection points in all four sides at certain height and a certain location, so that you and I could both show up, having never talked to each other, put both up next to each other, and those connection points, the walkway meets up, right?
The
And we could
Lego
build.
API.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I could make a huge square of 12 different things. As long as they all connected, you could show up with years of one and attach it, and somebody else could come afterwards and attach it.
That's brilliant.
So it made it easier to do things individually and then connect. And we really encourage those. There's other types of those type of building activities now that have grown over time and in other parts of the community. But um, you know the the business you're in kind of dictates what the focus is, what the ratio of focus is. I always like to say there's always room for an offline event, right? That offline event may be nothing more than inviting your top 15 super users to come to the headquarters and give you some feedback, meet some people, get excited, get enthusiastic, share their opinions, but also learn some things about the company. Or it could be an ongoing series of Lego Fest type events, right, all over the country or all over the world. At Apple, we had millions of unique visitors a month to the support community, as you might imagine.
Hmm.
And we had a huge percentage of the questions answered by a couple hundred super users. And I put together super user meetups in various cities, just for us to make sure to be able to share out what we're doing, what our product roadmap was, what our engagement roadmap was, so that they knew about it, and if they knew about it, they could be better in line to support it, but also to get feedback about it, right? To make sure that
Hmm.
my product roadmap I wasn't building something for them that they just couldn't possibly care less about, right? Um, but those were much smaller, more directed type of sessions. But we did them. We did them regularly, and I assume
And
that
in
Apple
person.
continues
Yeah.
to do those. Yeah, in person. There's something dynamic about in person, especially pre-pandemic, that trying to do a virtual event for these things, especially at that time, it
Yeah.
misses something. I think we've come worlds further along on this. I mean, my Dinner 5 event is a monthly event that I do only virtually right now, and we're starting to find the groove that people actually enjoy uh, doing the box of snacks and the 5 people online in the midday, almost better than when we were doing a 5 course catered meal in person
Hmm.
pre-pandemic, right? So it's an interesting dynamic, but I always think there's room for in person. There's always value there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I find is that I like to take um, this image when like balancing online and offline is a bit like going out for dinner. You during the pandemic, you could no longer go out for dinner, so you had your food delivered. Now that you can still go to the restaurant, you still have food delivered, but you go to the restaurant every now and then. So I guess people are now into the habit of sort of balancing online and in person, and I think it's good to have both.
Yeah, and I'll say, and again, sorry for the landscapers that are literally right outside my window, about 2 feet away from me. Um, the, what has worked well is the building experiences for the channel appropriate to the channel, so to speak, right? If we're going to you take the restaurant term into business, the restaurant concept into business terms. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Great.
No background
Fantastic
noise.
microphone then, because they
Yeah,
are
it's
literally right
working.
here.
It's doing
Yeah.
a beautiful job.
Uh, yeah. Haven't seen them all week, and of course they show up right now. Um, but so I'm a huge foodie. My girlfriend and I, we've been together for years, and this is one of our big things that we do is go out to find really interesting restaurant experiences. Uh, what's interesting to me is that pre-pandemic there were some options around town, and Austin has a great food scene. But boy, the dynamics of what's happening now with food in Austin, and trying to say, okay, fine, if you're going to get a majority of your food delivered to you now, instead of coming in to see us, a lot of these restaurants are starting to say, so when you come to see us, we're going to make it really interesting,
Mm,
right? There's this. So I don't know if you guys are seeing the same thing, but we love sushi, and they've started creating these 12-person sushi counter events, or dinners where they only have 2 seatings a night. They're kind of pricey, but it's a 12
great
person
experience.
max at any one time, and they have this high end, interesting food, interesting experience. You can pair it with sakis along the way. There wasn't as many of those pre-pandemic. There's a ton of those now, and they're selling out a month in advance. They open up the reservations for the coming month, and they're sold out in 20 minutes. Right? And I think that this is the point here, is finding this balance of what's right for the right channel, right? How do we deal with online? How do we deal with our super users? How do we deal with events for super users? How do we deal with events for everybody else? What's that mix, and how does it all fit together in a nice puzzle?
Great, cool. Um, we've gone slightly off topic, but it's great. It's very insightful. The one question I wanted to ask, as we're getting close to the end of the talk, is so community metrics. If you want to keep your job as a community builder, I guess you have to at some point report metrics around what community does, how it helps. I don't know,
Mhm.
reduce your cost, like support call deflection or lead generation, whatever you call it. So metrics have to be central to a community building experience. Uh, does it really matter? And is there anything that matters more than metrics?
Yes. Well, so yeah, all that matters. Yes. And I think that, how you said at the beginning is something that I like to talk a lot about, which is, if you want to keep your job, what's the easiest way to keep your job? It's to be able to show business value, right? And by and large, too many of the conversations that community nerds have about community metrics is community metrics, not business metrics. Because I could measure 50 different things about the platform I'm on and put that in a dashboard and present it out. And it looks great for 30 seconds until somebody says to themselves, yeah, but what does this matter? It's great data. What's the story you're trying to tell me about that data, right? And the story only matters as it relates to what the business is here to do. Because if I'm not fundamentally driving the business or understanding or tapping into the business metrics, why are we spending the money we're spending? Why does my salary exist in the first place? And I've always talked about understanding what the CEO's priorities are for the year for the company, and starting there. Because if their business focus is about um, closing new feature requests loops, right? So that every time somebody comes in and says, I think this should be built into the product, that they actually, one of the problems of the past, let's say, has been that they don't do much with those, and clients are really irritated because they submit all this feedback and it doesn't go anywhere, and the products suffer because of that. The uptake of feature usage suffers because they're not really aligned with that. And so the CEO says, one of our company objectives is not only to increase sales, but to improve the new feature request process. And you're not part of that as a community developer, you've inherently failed right there. And you're going to have a really hard time getting that CEO to pay attention to what you're doing in community, because what does it matter to what's important to them? That CEO has said, I got 3 things this year that we got to focus on. Your first task is to figure out how you align with those 3 things. Then you can start to address what community metrics matter below that, right? And the story you tell when you put those stats that you believe are relevant into a dashboard. So if you start at the top and say new feature request closure is a company objective this year, from a community standpoint, we are going to do these activities to help drive those things. We're going to build this set of tools to help close that loop on new feature requests. And I'm just picking this one randomly. Could be anything. Then when I go to create my dashboard that says how many return visitors we have, that data point is interesting from a pure community standpoint. But now I'm telling a story about it. I'm thinking about it in terms of, we're getting repeat users who are hitting the new feature request as part of their return 20% more. Therefore, we are delivering on the CEO's goals, the company goals for that year, right? That's very different. That's a very different discussion than, let me show you my dashboard that has return users, and everybody except you looks at it, maybe even you look at it and say, why do I think that this is important,
Yeah,
right?
love that. Great. Amazing. Thank you so much. I think we're running out of time, but you certainly have a lot to share. So it's really really nice. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Of course, happy to. Thanks for the invite.
It's been really really good. Let's talk backstage. And for those who are still listening in, I'm going to post a little very honest and open message in the chat, because we just talked about being super open. We like to host these talks because we want people to know more about how communities are made, how communities are managed. And we have built our own community platform called Melting Spot. Usually introduce it at the beginning. I forgot to do that. So feel free to give it a try, create your spot, invite your folks, and start engaging your community on Melting Spot. And please provide feedback. Thank you. It's been amazing. I hope to be able to share a dinner 5 at some point with you, Jake.
Yeah, I'm working hard to figure. I've had food at every dinner 5, even through the pandemic, which was quite a challenge. So I'm trying to figure out how to host in Europe, but also make sure that there's food at the event. So I'm working on it.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and have a lovely day in the US and a great evening in Europe. Speak to you soon. See you, Jake.
Thank you.
Bye bye.